Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder and this is BRN AM for Wednesday, October 28th, 2020. And our top stories today, fall enrollment trends downward and colleges under fire for lack of foreign reporting. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Rick Seltzer. He's an editor with Inside Higher Ed. Rick, welcome back to the program. Great to have you on this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So let's talk about fall enrollment. I think based on some of the reporting that you and the team at Inside Higher Ed have done, it's actually down this fall. What can you tell us here?
Yeah, that's right. We recently had a really important early indicator come out, and it showed that as of September 24th, undergraduate enrollment was tracking about 4% lower than it was at the same point last fall. And that's based on reporting from an organization called the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. It covers roughly 54% of colleges and universities, about 9.2 million students. They've been updating us a couple times throughout the fall. They should have, I believe, a final count out in several weeks. The real concern here is that first-time students saw the largest declines. It's more than 16% fewer freshmen enrolled this fall versus last fall. That group of freshmen was most responsible for that overall loss in undergraduates that you saw. And that's a real concern because if you do not enroll them as freshmen, retain them. And so obviously there's a pipeline problem then looking down the line for either a 2-year institution or a 4-year institution.
Yeah, and Rick, just to jump in here before you go through additional numbers, do we have a sense, and I understand, look, it's a business. I mean, it may be an academic institution, but it's a business and you want to make sure you retain your payments through all 4 years. But do we have a sense for what these kids are doing? They graduate from high school. They're not maybe taking a year off or 6 months off. Are they going to a 2-year school? Are they going to a trade school? Are they working full time? Or are they just touring the U.S.? Well, probably not touring the U.S., but maybe doing something digitally.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it's unclear. We can say a few things anecdotally or logically are happening right now. One is you may be depending on which set of demographic information you're looking at, what institution you are. You actually maybe would have expected to see a flat or declining year this year in a normal time just because of the number of students that were graduating and where they were and who they were and whether they were most likely to enroll. We also hear a lot about, and this is more anecdotal, but about families that maybe lost a job, maybe lost a stream of income or had their hours cut back, and suddenly the student doesn't have the money to go, or is in a family situation where maybe they have to help care for siblings, or maybe they themselves had to work to get through college, and the jobs that they were going to work to help them pay for tuition just aren't there. One thing we can say definitively is they are not going to community colleges. In fact, first-year students were down most sharply at community colleges by 23%. So that's almost a quarter, almost 1 in 4 first-year students from community colleges this year versus last year. That's particularly worrying because it's actually a reversal of a trend that we saw in 2019. Community colleges had done pretty well that year. So that seems to be a real area to circle in on. And be concerned about.
Yeah. Now, in terms of, we've talked over and over about college finances, university finances, and the challenges there, the challenges with not being able to not rent out, but use your dorm rooms, and what the impact is on staff. Any thoughts or any analysis done on the financial aspects of this? Are colleges and universities, they're reporting, you're seeing a decline, but what does this mean overall to the financial health of these organizations?
Yeah, it's a little early again to know across the board in any definitive way who's doing better and who's not, because this is actually a sector that's pretty notorious for reporting data late. But we can say that there are many institutions that are really hurting. Now, if you want to talk about that section, the community colleges that has had the biggest hit this year, they're probably most likely to be okay long term. They have diverse funding streams. local revenue, local tax revenue, state tax revenue, tuition dollars. They tend to have a little more flexible of a cost structure as well, adjunct professors, et cetera. But this is still a real stress on them, especially if all those students who didn't go this year decide to enroll next year or in 6 months, right? You kind of then have that capacity issue you've cut, and then all of a sudden you have to ramp up. As far as other institutions go, it's a real concern for colleges and universities, particularly private colleges and universities that are heavily tuition dependent, have small endowments, and those that are maybe reliant on room and board for a lot of revenue. Many of these places either did not bring students back for the fall or only brought a smaller percentage of students back for the fall. One other area that we have to worry about going forward is the public four-year sector. And that is going to be largely dependent on how much states get hit, how much states have to cut from education budgets. But one thing that we do know is that higher education, since it has other revenue streams, since it can draw from tuition, a lot of times legislators like to cut from the money that they put to that when times get tough.
Yeah. And Rick, last question for this segment. What does this mean? And this is a hypothetical, of course, but if you have kids that are taking a year off, this may have an impact on our workforce, because if people are maybe they're going to work for a year, but they are going to go back to school at some point, maybe, or to a trade. What could this mean for job hirings and workforce placement, et cetera? We want these kids to have great opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a concern both from if you are a parent who wants your student to have a great opportunity in the future, whether you are the student themselves who wants to have a good, bright future, or whether you're an employer who wants a strong workforce and to be able to pick from talented people. We do not know what will happen in the years to come if these students who did not enroll in college are just not going to come back, or whether they are going to, go more part-time or just come back in a glut in a year. However, I do think it raises some real concerns about everything from your skilled, trained trades worker, your HVAC technician who maybe would have gone to community college, all the way up to if you're in finance or some of these fields that require a PhD. I think it could be a real supply shock to the labor force, and we're just going to have to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to Rick about college and foreign reporting. This one kind of has bubbled up again. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate co-pays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month. Look, with the uncertainty of the virus and vaccines, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Here's the bottom line. Call to get significant benefits at no additional cost and see if your zip code has coverage with the Give Back benefit. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-924-3920. That's 1-800-924-3920.
Welcome back. We're talking to Rick Seltzer of Inside Higher Ed. Rick, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
My pleasure.
So another topic, obviously enrollment and student loan debt, big topics for students and universities. But this one has really bubbled up. What can you tell us about colleges and universities and foreign reporting? Obviously we're in an election year, a couple weeks or a week plus from the election. What's top of mind for this story?
Yeah, just October 20th, the Department of Education released a report on college and university compliance with a little section of the Higher Education Act. It's Section 117. Sounds like this boring piece of bureaucratic compliance, maybe a Byzantine piece of compliance, but it's a really interesting and important situation. This is a reporting requirement that actually requires colleges and universities to report the foreign gifts and contracts they receive to the feds. Twice a year, they're supposed to report these gifts and contracts if they are valued at $250,000 or more. Mm-hmm. And then they also have to disclose foreign ownership or control, which for most of your private nonprofits probably isn't an issue. Now, to be clear, these institutions are not prevented from taking foreign money. They just have to disclose the fact that they're doing it. But this is a part of the law that arguably enforcement has been lax on or waxed and waned over the years. And the Trump administration has been taking a harder line on this requirement and making a big deal about it recently. Political considerations aside, I think it's really important. The administration has opened a dozen investigations into compliance at this point, and it's taking credit for prompting the disclosure of $6.5 billion in previously unreported foreign gifts going to colleges and universities. Just this summer, the Department of Education put out a new online portal. They say since it was released in June, they received about 7,000 transaction reports worth $3.8 billion in foreign gifts and contracts. Yeah, so, it's...
Well, Rick, I was gonna ask you, I mean, like you said, these are legitimate sources of revenue. Is it more of a taxation question? Like if you're not reporting it, it's not being taxed as a gift or as a benefit, and therefore this is something the Treasury wants to get a hold of? Or is it more just looking for transparency? Because many universities and colleges have affiliates in other countries. I mean, come to mind, American University is one that comes to mind, where they have affiliates all over the globe. What is really the key issue here with not reporting?
Absolutely. Well, the Trump administration certainly views the world through a harsher lens than maybe some previous administrations did, and that translates to higher ed. I'm going to quote directly from the report that they put out, and basically it shows they are concerned that foreign actors are trying to buy influence or trying to buy trade secrets or steal trade secrets from the United States. So here's a direct quote. For at least 2 decades, the industry, that's the higher ed industry, has been on direct notice that at least some of these foreign sources are hostile to the United States and are targeting their investments to project soft power, steal sensitive and proprietary research, and spread propaganda. That's the quote. There are many other kind of bombastic quotes in there like that.
Sure.
And so the argument that the politicians are making, or that the administration is making, is that one of the mechanisms to prevent those negative things from happening, foreign soft power being extended, sensitive trade secrets being stolen, is reporting, is transparency. Kind of that sunlight is the best disinfectant question. And then if institutions have not been allowing that sunlight in, it could raise some real questions, is the argument.
And Rick, I mean, a lot of these universities, they do a tremendous, I guess the crux of this is they do a tremendous amount of research. I mean, some of our biggest and brightest students and faculty are doing research, they're getting grants, they're creating technologies, future technologies, future things that we will use in industry and also militarily. That seems to be, if people are coming in and trying to buy influence, there's concern that they could be sharing some of that research with people who maybe have ill will towards our country.
That's right. And you also see it with things like there was recently a giant controversy over institutes which are funded by different interests, I believe, an arm of the Chinese government. And a lot of institutions have been under pressure from the administration to close those down. And those were on U.S. soil in some cases. So there is all sorts of concern, whether it is research, as you outlined, is absolutely correct, or just some other kinds of cultural exchange questions, which, I do not have the visibility to know. Everything may be completely on the up and up there. The concern is reporting. The concern is if there's influence. And some of these institutions, and by the way, the ones that are under the microscope right now, these are the wealthiest institutions. They don't tend to be your local public college.
Sure.
They are your Ivy League institutions. Some of these places have pretty sophisticated fundraising capacity, pretty sophisticated tracking capacity, and just didn't report to the federal government for years on end when there is this requirement. Now, their lobbyists will tell you that the reporting situation is never clear with Washington, that it is a very bureaucratic, difficult process. But ultimately, this is an area where the administration is able to kind of twist some arms and say, do we have a problem here? And we'll just have to see where it goes going forward.
And last question, Rick. I mean, we talked about fall enrollment being down, and we've talked over and over about financial pressures. Does this, you mentioned these are some of the wealthiest universities, which have different layers of fundraising capabilities. Does this even have a financial impact other than, okay, well, you can't get $250,000 from XYZ program in another country, you just find another source for it? I mean, does this really have a financial impact because they can just raise it from somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the big question for that is where else would they raise it from, and what other strings would be attached? One thing that we're seeing more and more of is that these donations, these grants, they actually can have an impact on what you research, what you look at, what you do. Even if you're talking about domestic money, there was an enormous story in the last year or two about institutions that took money from the producers of OxyContin. And did they use the research that money funded to actually kind of downplay the ability of that opioid to be addictive, which obviously would have some real problems, both for the institutional quality or the institutional impartiality, as well as what happened with the opioid crisis across this country. Yeah. So, donations do tend to warp a little bit what institutions do. And that kind of interaction between what behaviors you're following because of which donors you have is going to be a really important one, even for these places that have very, very high fundraising capacity.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see. And again, this is a cascading effect. We talked about students and universities, and this is, I think, part of that conversation as well. Rick, always a pleasure speaking with you and learning what you guys are covering over at Inside Higher Ed. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back on the program again real soon.
Hey, thank you. I'll look forward to it too.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or somebody you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited, and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.